All right, welcome back to Hardware Unboxed for part 2 of the January 2019 Q&A. We're still sweating in here with that heat wave we talked about in the previous episode. But obviously, if you haven't seen part 1, go back, check that one out first, because we always put all the good questions in part 1, leave all the stragglers for part 2, of course.
Yeah, so this will be the Q&A not worth watching.
Yeah,
this intro is terrible.
Anyway, let's get into some questions.
Okay, Sal Kagan has snuck in a pair of questions into the one question, I suppose. Well, I'll read out mine, you can read out yours. Right. Steve, what games are you looking forward to benchmarking in the near future? Well, I'd have to say this year I'm really looking forward to Team Sonic Racing.
I think it's going to be a big one.
Sorry, I couldn't keep a straight face. No, seriously, I wasn't really looking forward to it initially, but I am now. Anthem. That looks pretty awesome.
Look visually impressive.
Visually impressive. So at least as a GPU benchmark, that should be pretty awesome. And then you've got like Metro Exodus for a few reasons looking into it.
I'm personally excited for that because it's the first ray-traced global illumination game. So we'll see how that goes.
That's one of the reasons why I'm looking forward to that one. That'll be one that Tim and I can both dive into. But yeah, so Anthem and Metro are probably the two games that are coming up fairly recently that I'm pretty excited about benchmarking.
Yeah, so Sal also asked for me, what was your favorite monitor showing at CES? Yeah, there were some interesting monitors. I think a lot of them were fairly typical, like nothing super crazy was shown off in my opinion. I think it's the 1440p 240Hz monitor, the TN1. I think Lenovo was the first to release that I'm sort of interested in. Not necessarily because I think 240Hz is all that necessary. I'm just interested to see, how they've managed to get that panel, 1440p up to 240Hz, whether that has any drawbacks or anything. And obviously it'll be pretty difficult to drive 200 plus FPS 1440p in a lot of games. But that's probably the interesting thing. And as well, I think there was some interesting ultra-wide panels as well that sort of are pushing non-standard resolutions at higher refresh rates. So we'd seen, there's been some ultra-wide 1610 or double-wide 1610 panels at 60 Hz. Now those are at 144 Hz. So that stuff's also pretty exciting.
Yeah, well, basically that leads us into the next question from Ibslice, who says, if the Discord chat is anything to go by, the monitor releases at CES were pretty disappointing. It seems most people wanted a 1440p or widescreen 27-32-inch HDR that was affordable. What's your view on it, and do you think more releases are to come this year to quench the thirst?
Yeah, so this is a great question because I've a lot of thoughts on where HDR is going for desktop monitors. And my current theory with this is that we're not seeing those affordable, decent HDR panels because companies can get away with putting HDR on basically anything. So right now you can buy, there's so many monitors on the market that are branded as HDR, whether that's, display HDR 400 certified or whatever. And so there's no incentive for a company to make a, entry-level to mid-range HDR monitor that has actual good HDR because they can just put HDR on whatever. So I think for a while, until that sort of gets resolved, we're only going to get HDR for high-end monitors, which will have features like full array local dimming that is required to effectively get good HDR. So I think that's going to be a problem for quite some time. And looking at the display roadmap for what AU Optronics, LG, the main manufacturers have coming up, it definitely looks like that's also their plans, is that they're only putting their full array dimming backlights with their really high-end panels. That could be like a 4K 27-inch or 4K 32-inch panel, and that's going to be very expensive. So it could be a while until we get that. But I think similar to the TV ecosystem, where when TVs first launched with HDR, they had this similar problem. Lots of mid-range TVs had terrible local dimming, terrible HDR, whereas now you can buy like a $600 or $700 US TV that has full array local dimming and really good HDR. I just think it's going to take some time for that sort of to filter down. So yeah, a bit disappointing that they didn't go with it this year, but I still think that's a few years off, unfortunately. All right, we've got a question here about Virtual Link. Can the USB Type-C Virtual Link port on RTX Turing cards be used for anything other than headsets that support VirtualLink? For example, if you put a Type-C flash drive into it, would it read it? Has anyone ever tested this? So when this question was asked, I went and tested it.
Kind of embarrassing that we never test. I mean,
I guess it's just a USB-C port. You don't really think too much of it.
Yeah, I assumed it would work just as a USB port.
Yeah, and it turns out that it does. You can plug in a USB device and it will run at USB 3.1 Gen 2 speeds. So that's the capability that the port has. And basically when you plug in the headset to use VirtualLink, that adds in the DisplayPort signals in there as well to that. So yes, if you, for example, don't have a case that has USB-C and you have a Turing card, you can just plug in whatever USB-C device is in there and it should work.
So really that adds a lot of value to the RTX series because it's a USB 3.1 hub essentially.
Yeah, for one port.
For one,
one device, that's pretty good.
Yeah, they should have bundled an RTX hub with it.
Yeah, better than ray tracing. Okay, so here is our top upvoted question from the YouTube comment section. So Steve, how many FX CPUs do you secretly own?
Well, I don't know if any of them are secrets, but I think I have about 6 or 7 in total.
Yeah,
so
just love them.
Yeah, I know. I know this is just an attempt to squeeze in an FX related question after I said I wouldn't do them anymore.
Do you keep them under your pillow, like your favorite one?
I keep them near because I love them so much. All right, how far has Vega come since its release? Well, you can buy it now, so that's kind of good. Can Radeon 7 be a bit misleading at first time and then crush everything with driver optimization? It's basically saying is, out of the gate, it may be a bit underwhelming, but is that misleading and over time will it get better and better? To answer that one, I think no. I would say AMD's in a pretty good place with their drivers at the moment. It's not where they're sort of fumbling around and then all of a sudden you get a big performance gain in this title because they've worked things out or whatever. I would say for at least the last few years, AMD's been right on top of their driver game, doing a fantastic job, and that kind of kills a bit of the fine wine because we're getting the RX 480, for example. We saw pretty big gains a year later from that thing with driver development. And then we haven't really seen the same with the RX 580, which is a refresh of the 480.
I think it helps that the card is based on Vega as well. It's not
it's not a whole new architecture. So I don't think so. I think it'll come out of the gate pretty much doing what it's going to do. Of course, there will be driver optimizations for certain titles here and there, but you're not going to see like a 10% gain across the board 6 months later or anything like that. So I think the reviews on day one won't be misleading in that sense. I think it'll be pretty much what it is. Okay, this question's from Sawyer. Why have stock CPU speeds stopped at 4.5 to 5 gigahertz? Basically 5 gigahertz for a single core, really. Yep. Is the limit from silicon, or is it just not worth it because of extra heat and power? Which is pretty much a silicon limit. So, it's pretty much the limitation of what we can currently do with the materials being used. Got nothing to add to that? It's pretty simple.
No, I mean, to get higher clock speeds, you tend to need higher voltages, but it gets to a point where you can't just keep pushing the voltage. You get to a limit where beyond that point it starts to damage the hardware itself. So that's basically where we're at. Where obviously they don't ship CPUs that are right on that voltage limit. It's always a little bit below, but certainly even an overclocked version of these chips only hit sort of that low 5 gigahertz range.
Yeah, well, the transistors can only move so fast, and throwing more voltage at them, you get voltage leak, which adds to excess power usage, thermals, and that's pretty much why we're stuck where we're at the moment.
Right, one of our longtime Discord members, Revel Devil 2000, has got another monitor question for me here. What's your opinion on the rise of 32.9 and 3210 displays? 3210 1440p looks like a dream for certain software / productivity.
I had some pretty good things to say about this, but since it's addressed to Tim, I'm just going to sit back and sip some water.
Nah, you've been banned from giving an opinion on this one. My opinion's changed on these ultra-wide monitors. When I first saw the 32.9 monitor, I thought, oh, that's ridiculous. Like, who would ever want a monitor that's so wide it looks really stupid? But when you think of it as two 16.9 monitors or 1610 monitors side by side, it makes a lot of sense because people have used that sort of setup for a long time with multiple monitors, and this just condenses it into the one display with no bezels. That sounds really good. I'm a fan now. I'm a fan of these monitors.
Can I jump in with sort of a novice noobish kind of question as someone who's completely ignorant, never used one. How do you go with, because obviously you can drag one window there and one window there.
Yeah.
It's exactly as you say. What if you want to do 4, like you would do on, like you know, how does that work?
Yeah, I mean, in that situation, you probably have to get special software to do that.
Yeah,
but a lot of these monitors also have a picture-in-picture mode, so you can actually have a 16:9 input on either side.
Okay.
So theoretically, you could actually just run 2 cables from your PC and run them as 2 16:9 monitors, and then get the benefit of having the content either side. The downside to that, though, is if you want to use it for gaming, where you'd want it to span the entire 32.9, you would then have to basically unplug it and plug in.
Yeah,
which is it's a bit clunky. So I think, there is software that can do that, though, to sort of set up different zones on the monitor. But that's something that will, I guess, continue to get better. But I quite like those sort of monitors. I think if you want 2 16:9 monitors, you're probably better off with
it's the functionality, because I'd love to have maybe Premiere open in one, then Excel and maybe Google Docs or something like that. Like, it'd be cool if you could have dedicate the zones a bit better.
Yeah, I think Windows would need to include some functionality for that.
So you need to do, if you drag it and hit that point there, it puts it there, and then that one, and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
That's my only concern with that. But
yeah, and again, I think it's good that these monitors, particularly not just the 32.9 1080p monitors, but all sorts of monitors are now high refresh as well. So we can get a wide variety of resolutions and sizes that are also suitable for gaming. Okay, this is another question from Revel Devil 2000. One of the straight up worst experiences with consoles, so I guess game consoles, is the horrendous loading times of some games. Battlefield 5 takes a minute or two just to get to the main menu. Then he brings up AMD Store MI. Is that practical for next gen? Maybe it'll allow us to use a small external SSD so it keeps the cost of the console low. Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure they'll specifically use Store MI as named like that, but it wouldn't surprise me if the next generation consoles had a small SSD cache for, storing some game assets, maybe the game you're currently playing, with a larger hard drive, like a 1 terabyte hard drive. Or potentially they'll use one of those hybrid SSHDs.
Yeah, I don't think that doesn't really help initial loading of the game, though, does it?
Yeah, so I think they would need to do some more fancy caching so that it's better, the assets that you want to use, such as maybe they have a 64 gig cache, which would probably hold most games, and then have the rest of it on hard drive. I think that would work reasonably well. I'd be interested to see what the consoles do with that, but I think that's probably a way to manage the expensive cost of SSDs with sort of needing that performance, because you wouldn't want another entire console generation, which would be 7 years of hard drive loading speeds on games again. So I think they'll probably do something there.
Yeah, hot swappable drives would be pretty cool.
Yeah, you can already change out the drive on the consoles, but you can swap in an SSD and get much faster load times. But I'd be hoping that they would include some solid state storage for just out of the box. I think that would be good. All right, we've got another question from YouTube. Dodgy practice aside, Nvidia have consistently shown they're simply waiting for AMD to catch up before releasing a new product, i.e. the 1070 Ti. Do we really believe Navi will be better than Vega, which was spoken as a revolutionary product and turned out to be somewhat underwhelming? We all want competition, but it seems like AMD are choosing market segments very carefully because Nvidia are so far ahead. Again, we're really not sure what Navi's going to bring in terms of improvements over Vega, but I do agree that Nvidia tends to sort of keep what they're doing to their chest and sort of just release it whenever AMD sort of gets their products out.
It's probably even more just sort of moving defective stock is where we see those things later in the product cycles. That's what they're probably doing, really.
Yeah, but I certainly think that, Navi will be coming before NVIDIA's 7nm or 8nm, not sure on that one. Certainly their next generation parts on a new process from NVIDIA will be coming after AMD's Navi. That seems to be the case. So it'll be very interesting to see how Navi stacks up to current products, whether that's an architecture that's targeting the mid-range or the high-end, we're still not sure. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see, if Navi only is catching up to what Turing can do now, then they might struggle a bit when NVIDIA's parts on 7nm come in, because then they'll be able to do their own set of enhancements on that new process technology. So
yeah, which we're expecting to happen. They're at least a generation behind. So
yeah, so AMD again, we keep saying this, but they do need to do a fair bit of catching up in the GPU game, and it remains to be seen whether that's going to happen with Navi, a future generation, or whether it just remains that they're a generation behind for some time. So I got a question here from YouTube as well. Why is ray tracing mirroring VRAM usage in Battlefield 5? RTX 2060 6GB is not enough to run this game at 1080p Ultra with DXR because of its 6GB. Apparently Digital Foundry looked into that.
Okay.
All right. Resident Evil has a whopping 9GB VRAM usage on high settings now as well. Do you think it's safe to purchase a 6GB card nowadays? So I'll pass that second part on to Steve in a moment. But the mirroring of VRAM in Battlefield 5, that's something that is, I guess, interesting, something that I hadn't really heard about. But I suspect they probably have to do something where they have the assets duplicated to run the ray tracing pass and also the standard rasterization pass. Previously, that was all just done at once. So you just, presumably, you only needed the one asset pipeline for that. With ray tracing, you need two pipelines. So maybe that's why it's mirrored. I'm not saying that's the definitive reason, but I think that would make a lot of sense. What do you think about 6GB cards?
The old VRAM debate. Well, it depends on the game, the quality settings you want to use. For something as powerful as an RTX 2060, which we haven't really tested yet, so it's hard to comment, it does seem like it would be on a knife edge there.
Yeah.
You would...
Because the 1070 Ti and 1080 that it's sort of replacing were 8GB cards.
That's right. So... yeah, I don't know there. It'd be interesting to do a few tests, which we will do. But I don't have any trouble believing that, yeah, it's right on the edge and it won't be too long before we start seeing problems, just as we started to with the 3GB 1060 causes all sorts of problems with less than 16GB of RAM. So, yeah, like I said, I can't really say anything for sure, but it does seem like that could be a problem, and it certainly will be in the future. Joey always says, or asks rather, question for Q&A, where do you see... Oh, look, has he used the right acronym there?
This is the wrong acronym. We were just talking about this. HWUB.
Yeah, we don't officially recognise that. Where do we see Harbour Unboxed in 2 to 5 years? These questions always sort of get me a bit because, I don't know, it's so unpredictable in some ways, like the whole YouTube thing. And it makes it sort of sound like we don't have any goals or mission or anything, but I don't think about it too much. I mean, I don't really know where we'll be. We just sort of take it 1 year at a time. We just try to do the best content we can, make as much content as we can, and what happens, happens. It's hopefully it just continues going the way it does. I mean, we did about 140,000 subscribers last year, which is pretty awesome. Views by the end of the year were good. It was kind of weird. Last year, we started off really well. Then the whole notification thing happened, and like the middle of the year was just so slow. And then it picked up again towards the end of the year. Tied in a little bit with product cycles, but there was some weird YouTube-ish stuff going on there.
Yeah.
But we don't really... I mean, I don't see the channel changing or anything.
Yeah, I just like to think that in 2 to 5 years, we're just doing the same sort of content but better.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think we're going to have loads of staff or anything like that.
I also can't see us moving towards more mainstream coverage like a Linus Tech Tips did over time.
No, I mean, it's fine that he's done that and he wants to do it, and if that's the content he enjoys making, that's perfectly fine. I mean, a lot of the stuff they do is really
it's
cool.
just probably something we're not interested in.
Yeah, I'm not interested in it. I just like doing my benchmark stuff. I would like to focus more on that kind of stuff. Have Tim do all the sort of investigation stuff on visuals and monitor reviews and all that, or whatever you just enjoy doing. But yeah, I think hopefully in 2 to 5 years it's going exactly how it's going now. That'd be nice.
Well, I guess we've spent especially you before I joined, but you spent a lot of time making Hardware Unboxed viable to sort of, support us and everything. And I think from here on, it's just about, because that's sort of we've already achieved viability at this point. We're still around, so that's good. And it's just continuing to sort of make good content. Yeah,
we just want to make it an enthusiast channel. We don't, like I said, we don't go mainstream. We don't want to turn it into a money making machine, a business or anything like that. Just do what we're doing.
Pretty much. All right, and that's it for part 2 of our Q&A. We're not sure whether we'll have a third part of this. Just depends on how many questions we want to put into each episode. But potentially you'll see a part 3 probably in a couple of days, maybe.
If I make it.
Yeah, if you make it, because still got a few questions to answer, and Steve is struggling big time with the heat here. It's not even that warm in here, but he's slamming the water.
It's plenty warm.
Whatever. As always, you can subscribe for more Hardware Unboxed content. Give us a like if you like our Q&A segments. What else do we say at the end of these videos? Oh, Patreon.
They can subscribe as well on YouTube.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
feel
definitely
free to
do that.
subscribe
and subscribe on Patreon, because then you give us money and we can afford things like food. So that's always nice. Maybe we'll get some air conditioning in here at some point with your Patreon money. So support us there, and we'll catch you in the very next one.